stepsister called me. Just a nurse in front of 96 people, and my own father laughed before anyone else did. The next day, she seated me at table 18, beside the service entrance, like I was something to hide from her new rich family. What she didn't know was that the groom's father had been searching for one woman for nearly 4 years. The off-duty nurse who kept him alive on I-95 after a crash almost killed him. My name is Tessa Monroe, and by the time Graham Sterling stood up in front of 178 wedding guests, the whole room finally learned why being just a nurse was the reason he was still breathing. Chapter 1. A name they called in right. I came home from St. Luke's Regional just after sunrise, with 14 hours of emergency room noise still humming inside my skull. My shoes were damp from the floor near trauma 2. My hair had that flat, tired bend from a mask strap. My hands smelled like sanitizer no matter how many times I washed them before leaving. There are mornings after a shift when the whole world feels too bright, too clean, too unaware of how close people come to not making it through the night. That morning, I had caught something a younger resident almost missed. The patient was an older man with gray hair, a careful wife, and the kind of polite smile men use when they are trying not to scare the people who love them. He had come in after a minor fall. Nothing dramatic, no movie blood, no screaming. His vitals looked almost fine, and almost is a dangerous word in an emergency department. I was checking his discharge papers when I saw his hand. Cold, not winter cold, not nerves cold, the kind of cold that makes the back of your neck pay attention. His breathing changed next, just a little. A half beat too shallow. A pause before he answered me. His skin had gone pale under the hospital lights, and his wife kept saying he was just tired. I stepped out and called Dr. Naomi Kessler back in. The resident looked annoyed for 3 seconds. Then the scan came back, tinal bleeding. Later, after they rushed him upstairs, Dr. Kessler found me at the nurse's station and said, "That's why I trust your eyes, Tessa." I wanted to hold on to that sentence. Not because it was dramatic. It wasn't. In the ER, praise usually comes in fragments between alarms. But it meant someone had seen the part of my job that most people never understood. The noticing, the watching. The way a nurse learns to hear trouble before the machines start screaming. Then I drove home to my small apartment in Fairfield County, unlocked the door, and found the wedding invitation on my kitchen table. Cream paper. Gold foil. Thick enough to feel expensive before I even opened it. Brielle Whitaker and Caleb Sterling. Sterling Estate, Greenwich, Connecticut. Rehearsal dinner at Fairview Ridge Country Club. It was beautiful, because everything Brielle touched had to be beautiful. Not warm. Not honest. Beautiful. I turned the card over, and there it was, Tessa Monroe, not Tessalyn. Not even Tessa Teresa. I stood there in my scrubs, still carrying the weight of a man who would have gone home bleeding if I had not trusted the small warning signs, stared at the wrong name my own family had mailed to me. There was no +1. I did not cry. Crying would have made it feel new, and this was not new. My family had never needed my name to be right. They just needed me to appear where they placed me. I set the invitation beside my RN badge, and that was when the old memories came up, not in a flood but in objects. The badge, the name, the small pearl earrings in the dish by my sink. My mother, Elise Monroe, died in 1998, when I was 7 years old. Most of what I have of her now fits inside one wooden box. A few photographs, one recipe card with her handwriting fading at the edges, and the pearl earrings she wore almost every day. She used to say they made her feel put together even when life was falling apart. 3 years after she died, my father married Marla Whitaker. I was 10. Brielle was 13. That was the year our house divided itself into 2 kinds of daughters. Brielle became our girl. Her pictures went on the staircase. Her school plays went on the calendar. Her feelings became whether everyone checked before entering a room. I became David's daughter, not Marla's, not ours. David's. I got the old study at the back of the house, with the flickering lamp and the file cabinet nobody wanted to move. I learned how to be easy, how to be useful, how to make myself smaller before anyone had to ask. My father was not a man who yelled. Sometimes I think yelling would have been easier to explain. He was quiet in all the wrong places. When Marla made a little joke about how serious I was, he smiled. When Brielle took something that was mine, he said I should be flexible. When I asked to be called Tessalyn, the name my mother chose, he laughed softly and said, "Tess is easier." Easy became the family religion. I was not bad at being easy. That was the problem. When I passed my RN boards, my father texted, "Proud of you, kiddo." He did not come to my pinning ceremony, because Brielle had a brunch that weekend with a client she said could change everything. When I was nominated for a Nursing Excellence Award in 2023, I tried to mention it at dinner. Brielle tilted her head and said, "Do they give awards for nurses now?" Marla said, "That's sweet." My father asked Caleb about interest rates. That was the last time I brought an achievement home at St. Luke's. My name was on my badge. It was on charts, schedules, commendation boards, medication logs. In my family, it could be printed wrong on a wedding invitation, and no one would think it mattered enough to fix. I opened my laptop because the invitation included the wedding website, and Brielle never missed a chance to tell a story with flattering lighting. The homepage loaded with a photo of her and Caleb standing in front of the water, her hand placed carefully on his chest, her ring angled toward the camera. Caleb Sterling was 36, a corporate attorney with the kind of calm face that made people trust contracts they had not fully read. His father, Graham Sterling, was 66 and ran Sterling Development Group. His mother, Lenora Sterling, sat on the board of the Sterling Foundation for First Responders. Brielle had not just found a husband. She had found a staircase. The section called Our Families read like a public relations campaign. David Monroe was described as a respected leader in the hardware industry, which was a polished way of saying my father managed an independent hardware store in Milford. Marla was called a former catering entrepreneur, which meant she had done neighborhood parties for a few years and once stayed cupcakes for a real estate office. Brielle wrote about family, grace, resilience, and loyalty. I scrolled until I found myself. Our quiet stepsister who works in healthcare, quiet. That word stopped me longer than the wrong name had. In my family, quiet meant do not ask. Do not correct. Do not tell the truth in a tone that makes prettier people uncomfortable. Healthcare, not emergency room. Not registered nurse. Not trauma nurse. Just healthcare, vague enough to keep me soft around the edges. I shut the laptop, but the room did not feel quiet anymore. I picked up the invitation to throw it away, then opened the drawer where I kept things I did not display. Inside was a copy of a public commendation from St. Luke's Regional Medical Center, dated 2021. I had never framed it. It was connected to a night on I-95 near Stamford, November 14th. Rain coming down so hard the road looked black and silver. I had been driving home after a shift when an 18-wheeler jackknifed ahead of me, and the highway folded into chaos. I remember glass under my knees, rain hitting my face. The car door bent so badly it looked melted, a man trapped inside, chest pinned, neck at a dangerous angle, asking me if he was going to die. I remember telling him to stay with me until the lights got there. I kept his airway open. I kept his neck still. I kept him talking for 38 minutes, while rescue crews worked through the wreckage. When his voice started drifting, I told him about my mother. About Elise. About the pearl earrings she wore when she read to me at night. About how she said steady hands could wait to shake until the work was done. The newspaper later called me an off-duty nurse. That was enough. Too much, even. I declined the interview, accepted the hospital commendation, and went back to work. My phone rang while I was still looking at the paper, Dad. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered. He sounded careful, which meant someone else had asked him to call. Brielle really wants you there, he said. For the family photo, so there it was. Not because she wanted me, because a missing stepsister might raise questions. I looked at the invitation again. I asked him if Brielle had spelled my name wrong on purpose. He paused, then he said, "It's just a card, Tess. Don't make it a thing. A thing. My name was a thing. My work was a thing. My absence was a thing. My pain was always a thing if it interrupted Brielle's picture." I looked at my mother's earrings sitting in the little dish beside the sink. I decided I would go, not because I owed Brielle a perfect wedding, not because my father asked, not because Marla would call me difficult if I stayed home. I would go because a part of me wanted to see how far they would take it this time, how carefully they would place me at the edge, how many times they could make me invisible while still needing me in the room. After I hung up, I opened the wedding website one more time and scrolled back to Our Families. The chosen photo filled the screen. David, Marla, Brielle, Caleb, all smiling in the golden light. No space where I had been cropped out. No hint that another daughter existed. Just a perfect family, polished clean, ready to be sold. Chapter 2. The family Brielle sold. To the Sterling's brunch at Sterling Estate was scheduled for 11 on Saturday, which meant Brielle expected everyone to arrive at 10:45 and act grateful for the privilege. I drove my Honda Civic through Greenwich with my navy dress hanging from the hook behind the seat, and my mother's pearl earrings already in my ears. The dress was from a Target clearance rack, $42 before tax, and I had ironed it twice because there are some rooms where wrinkles become evidence. Sterling Estate sat behind black iron gates and a row of maple trees trimmed so evenly they looked disciplined. A valet in a gray jacket stepped toward my car, then hesitated for half a second when he saw the make and model. I almost laughed. Even the driveway understood class. Inside the house was quiet in the way expensive places are quiet, not peaceful, managed. Cream walls, polished floors, flowers in heavy glass vases, sunlight arranged like it had been hired. Brielle stood in the center of the room with Caleb's hand resting lightly at her back. She wore ivory linen and gold hoops, understated enough to look effortless and expensive enough to make sure everyone knew it was not. She was smiling at Lenora Sterling when I walked in. Marla saw me first. Her eyes moved over my dress, my shoes, my earrings, and then landed on my face with the same expression she used when checking a table setting. David stood beside her in a new suit that sat too stiffly on his shoulders. He looked relieved when I arrived and ashamed of looking relieved. Elle turned toward me with a smile bright enough for photographs. "Tessa, you made it, not Tessalyn, not even close to an apology for Teresa on the invitation." "I did." Her eyes flicked toward my earrings. "That's a sweet touch." I touched one pearl without meaning to. They were my mother's. "I know," she said, already looking past me. "Just try not to disappear into a corner, okay? People will want to meet the family. The family, not me. The family as a display." Before I could answer, a woman with silver blonde hair and calm eyes approached me. Lenora Sterling moved like someone who never needed to rush because rooms waited for her. "You must be Tessalyn." For a second I forgot how to respond. "Yes," I said. "I am." She smiled like the name mattered. "Nora Sterling. I'm so glad you came." It was such a simple sentence that I had to remind myself not to give it too much weight. People with manners can sound kind without meaning to. Still, hearing my full name said correctly by a stranger in Brielle's future-in-law's house made something in my chest loosen and ache at the same time. Lenora's eyes dropped to the small RN keychain attached to my purse. "Are you in medicine?" I opened my mouth, but Brielle stepped in smoothly. "She helps out at a hospital." There it was. Not even a lie. Just a smaller container for the truth. I kept my voice even. "I'm a registered nurse in the emergency department at St. Luke's Regional." Lenora turned back to me fully. "That must be incredibly demanding." "It can be." Brielle laughed lightly. "Tessa's being modest. She's always been more comfortable behind the scenes." "Lenora, I have to show you the floral mock-up before the caterer changes it again." She touched Lenora's arm and guided her away before the conversation could grow roots. I watched them cross the room and 3 things became clear. Lenora did not look down on nurses. Brielle was afraid of that fact. And my father had heard the entire exchange and still said nothing. The brunch unfolded like a performance Brielle had rehearsed in her head for years. She introduced Marla as the woman who taught me grace and presentation. Marla pressed a hand to her heart like she had just been awarded something. Then Brielle introduced my father as David, who's worked in the hardware industry for over 20 years. That was technically true. My father managed an independent hardware store in Milford. It was honest work. It deserved to stand as itself. But Brielle polished it until it sounded corporate, the same way she polished family until there was no room for anything inconvenient. David smiled and nodded. He knew what she was doing. He let her do it. "Someone asked about me," Brielle answered before I could. "Tessa's more comfortable on the quiet side." I looked at my father. He adjusted his cuff. That was how she did it. She did not erase me with cruelty in public. She erased me with concern. She gave people a reason not to ask why I was standing outside the frame. A little later, I needed the restroom. A caterer pointed me down a hallway lined with framed photographs and dark wood doors. Halfway down, one door stood open. I would have kept walking if I had not seen the hospital photograph. A man in a bed, bruised face, neck brace, oxygen tubing. The kind of photograph families keep after they almost lose someone, proof that survival had a shape. Beside it was a newspaper clipping from the Fairfield County Register. Local developer survives I-95 crash after off-duty nurse intervenes. There was no name in the headline. My body went still before my mind caught up. I-95, rain flashed behind my eyes, glass under my knees, metal being cut open. A man's voice asking if he was going to die. On the desk sat a small card, propped against the frame. "To the nurse from I-95, the reason I came home." I stepped closer without deciding to. The man in the photograph was older, swollen from trauma, half hidden by medical equipment. Nearly 4 years can change a face. So can fear, so can blood. I did not know him. Not exactly. But my hands remembered something. A voice behind me said, "That was the night I got a second life." I turned quickly. Sterling stood in the doorway. He was taller than I expected, with silver hair and the kind of posture men get when people have listened to them for decades. But his voice was not proud in that moment. It was quiet. "I'm sorry," said. The door was open. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You didn't," he said. His eyes moved from my face to the clipping, then back. "It's not a private shame. It's a private blessing." I looked at the photograph again. "I'm glad you survived. So am I." He studied me a little too long. Not rudely, carefully. Like he was trying to place a song he had only heard once in another room. His eyes stopped at my earrings, pearls, small and old, catching the light. Something changed in his face. But before he could speak, Lenora called from the hall. "Graham, the caterer is asking about timing." He blinked and the moment folded closed. "Excuse me," he said. "It was nice meeting you, Tessalin." Again the full name. I walked back toward the main room with my pulse still too high. Brielle appeared before I reached the end of the hall. "Don't wander into private rooms," she said under her breath. The door was open. "This family values boundaries. Try to understand that." She said boundaries like she was talking about doors, but I knew better. She meant rooms, conversations, names, spaces in which I did not belong. Before I could answer, Marla touched my elbow. "Tessa, come help me outside for a second." Outside meant the garden, far enough from the guests that no one would hear the correction she had dressed up as concern. Marla folded her arms. "Elle is under so much pressure. I haven't done anything. That's not the point. Today is not about hospital stories." I didn't tell any hospital stories. She gave me that patient smile that was never patient. "Just be easy." There it was again, the family prayer. "Don't make people uncomfortable," she added. I looked toward the windows where Brielle was laughing beside Caleb and Lenora. "What do you want me to do?" Marla's answer came without hesitation. "Smile. Stay in the background. Let your sister have the room." I did not argue. Arguing would have given her the version of me she had already prepared. When we went back inside, Claire Danton, the photographer and videographer, was arranging a few informal family shots. David, Marla, Brielle, and Caleb stood together near the fireplace. I hovered a step behind, waiting for someone to say my name. No one did. Finally, Claire looked up from her camera. "Should Tessalin come in closer to her father?" Brielle answered before David moved. "No, that's fine." A tiny silence followed. David heard her. It did not correct her. Claire's eyes met mine for half a second. She said nothing, but she noticed. Some people notice quietly, and sometimes that matters later. By the time the brunch ended, I wanted nothing more than to leave. I'd made it to my car when I realized my light jacket was still on a chair by the back terrace. I went back through the side entrance. Voices drifted from the patio, Brielle's voice first. "Tessa gets overwhelmed." I stopped, Caleb answered softly. "She seemed fine to me." "Has social struggles," Brielle said. "Sometimes she has episodes, so we try not to push her. We support her from a distance." Another man spoke. "Grant Walker, Caleb's college friend. That must be hard on your family." Brielle sighed, perfectly measured. "It is, but we've learned to manage." The word landed like a lock turning. I stood behind the wall with my jacket in my hand and understood that Brielle had not simply made me invisible. She had given everyone a reason to believe invisibility was kindness. If I was left out of photographs, it was because I struggled. If I was seated far away, it was because I needed space. If no one asked about me, it was because my family was protecting me. She had turned neglect into compassion, and she had sold it beautifully. That night, I called my father. He answered on the fourth ring. "Did you know Brielle is telling the Sterlings I have episodes?" He sighed, not surprised enough. "She's just trying to keep things smooth." "Smooth for who?" "Tessa, this family is important to Brielle's future. Don't make everything harder. So you're fine with them thinking something is wrong with me as long as Brielle looks right? You're twisting this." I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "I think I'm finally hearing it straight." He did not answer. After we hung up, I opened the small wooden box where I kept my mother's earrings when I was not wearing them. I touched the pearls and remembered the man in the wreck on I-95 asking if I had a family. To keep him awake, I had told him about my mother. About Elise. About how she used to say, "If your hands are steady, your heart can shake later." I still did not know that the man had been Graham Sterling. I only knew that in his house on his desk, someone had kept a thank you note for a nurse no one had bothered to name. My phone buzzed before I closed the box. A message from Brielle, rehearsal dinner Friday. Please don't be late. And please keep things simple. Chapter 3. Table 14. 6 days later, by Friday evening, I had worked another full shift at St. Luke's, changed in the locker room under fluorescent lights, and stood in front of the narrow mirror, trying to make myself look like someone who had not spent the day moving between blood pressure cuffs, trauma charts, and families waiting for news. Mina Alvarez leaned against the locker beside mine, arms crossed over her navy scrubs, watching me pull the same navy dress from its hanger. "You sure you want to go? If I don't, they'll make that the story too." Mina's face softened. She knew enough about my family not to argue with that. "You don't owe them silence, Tessa." I smoothed the front of the dress, even though it was already smooth. "Silence is the only thing they've ever accepted from me." Before Mina could answer, Dr. Naomi Kessler passed the open doorway with a chart in her hand. She looked from the dress to my face, and understood more than I wanted her to. "Rehearsal dinner?" I nodded. She stopped just long enough to say, "Do not let anyone make your work sound small." Then she was gone, called back into the rhythm of the ER, where no one had time to pretend nurses were decorative. I carried that sentence with me all the way to Fairview Ridge Country Club. The building was all glass, warm lights, polished wood, and low voices. 96 people had been invited to the rehearsal dinner, which sounded intimate until you remembered most people did not have 96 people, watching them be politely erased. The seating chart stood near the entrance in a gold frame. I found my table near the bottom, Teresa M. Table 14, near the kitchen doors. I stared at the card for a moment, then exhaled through my nose. At some point, being surprised by the same wound becomes embarrassing. Table 14 had a smaller centerpiece than the tables near the front. There was one empty chair, distant cousin of Marla's whose name I did not know, and a young woman with soft brown hair who looked as uncomfortable as I felt. She glanced at the yarn keychain clipped to my purse. "Are you really an nurse?" I sat down. "I am. I'm Harper," she said. "Harper Sloan. Babysit for one of Caleb's cousins. I'm in my last year of nursing school." Her shoulders tightened when she said it, like she was confessing instead of sharing. "That's a hard year," I said. "I just finished an ER clinical rotation. I don't know if I'm strong enough for it." I looked at her hands, twisting the edge of her napkin. "Strength isn't not being scared, it's knowing what to do while you are." She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time that evening, I felt like someone had seen the right version of me. Across the room, Brielle moved through the guests like she had been born in soft lighting. She wore a pale champagne dress and held Caleb's arm with just enough pressure to look affectionate and territorial. Marla stood near the head table, laughing with Lenora Sterling. David was beside her, hand in his pocket, pretending he knew what to do with rich people. Graham Sterling sat near the front with a glass of water in his hand. Once, I felt him look toward table 14. Not stare. Look, like his mind had caught on something and could not let it go. Then Brielle took the microphone. The room settled immediately. She knew how to command attention without asking for it. That was one of her talents. She smiled, waited for silence, and began thanking people in a voice soft enough to feel intimate and polished enough to feel expensive. She called Marla, "My mother, my compass." Marla pressed a hand to her chest. She called David, "The man who showed up for our family." My father lowered his eyes in a way that might have looked humble if I did not know how often he had chosen not to show up for me. She thanked Graham and Lenora. The kind of people who make you believe in legacy. She thanked her bridesmaids, her clients, Caleb's friends, the vendors, even the floral designer. I thought she would skip me. For one brief second I hoped she would. Then she turned her face toward table 14. "And over there is my stepsister, Tessa. She's just a nurse." The pause before just was tiny, but I felt it land. A polite little blade. For 1 second, the room did not know what to do. Then my father laughed. Not a nervous cough. Not an awkward breath. A real laugh, warm enough to give everyone else permission. A few people joined him. Marla smiled like the room had behaved correctly. Harper did not laugh. Her face went pale and she looked down at her napkin as if she had just heard someone insult her future. At the head table, Graham Sterling did not laugh either. His glass stopped halfway to the table. His eyes fixed on me, sharp with concentration, as if he was trying to remember my face through rain. Claire Danton stood near the side wall with her camera, filming the speeches. A small microphone was clipped near the floral arrangement on the nearest service stand. Later, I would remember that detail. In that moment, I only heard my father's laugh. I did not stand. I did not cry. I did not leave. I folded my hands beneath the table and pressed one fingernail into my palm, until the sting gave me something clean to focus on. The worst part was not Brielle. Brielle had been making me smaller since we were children. The worst part was David. My father laughed like it was easier to laugh than to choose me. After the speeches, people moved into that loose, hungry conversation that happens before dinner is served. I was reaching for my water when a woman in a silver wrap dress stopped beside table 14, Victoria Hale. I remembered her from the brunch, one of Brielle's image-perfect guests. She smiled at me with her teeth. "So when she says nurse, do you mean bedpans and blankets?" Harper went still. I looked up at Victoria and kept my voice calm. "Sometimes. And sometimes it means noticing a man is bleeding internally before the monitor catches up." The smile disappeared from Victoria's face. "Oh," she said. "Yes," I said. "Oh." Did not add anything else. I did not need to turn my work into a speech for a woman who had already decided it was small. Across the room, Caleb had seen the exchange. He looked at me, then at Brielle. Something tightened in his expression. A few minutes later, I saw him lean toward her near the bar. "Did you mean it that way?" Brielle blinked up at him. "Mean what? Just a nurse." "Oh, come on," she said, laughing softly. "She knows I tease. Tessa likes staying low-key." Caleb did not argue, but he did not smile either. That was the first crack I saw in the story Brielle had sold him. I excused myself before dessert and found the powder room down a side hallway. I had barely turned on the faucet when the door opened behind me. Brielle stepped in and locked it. Her smile was gone. Tomorrow is my wedding. I dried my hands slowly. I'm aware. I need you to sit where you're assigned. I usually do. Don't turn this into a nurse story. I looked at her in the mirror. You were the one who said it. Don't corner Graham with hospital memories. Don't make my new family uncomfortable. There it was again. Her new family. The one she was selling a cleaner version to. Why did you tell them I have episodes? She did not even pretend not to understand. I told them what made things easier. For who? Everyone who doesn't want to spend my wedding managing you. I turned around fully. Is that what I am? Something to manage. Her eyes hardened. You're the part of the family that never fit the picture. For a moment, I saw the whole thing exactly as she saw it. The state, the Sterlings, the photographs, the future house in the right neighborhood, and me, a loose thread she could not cut without someone noticing. When I stepped out of the powder room, Marla was waiting near the hallway table. Brielle is emotional, she said. Don't hold it against her. Did you know what she was telling people about me? Marla's face barely moved. People don't need every detail. David appeared behind her, holding his suit jacket over one arm. I looked at him and waited. One sentence. That was all I wanted. He could have said my name. He could have said Brielle was wrong. He could have said he was sorry for laughing. Instead, he looked tired. Let's get through tomorrow. That was when I understood no one in my family was going to stop her. I left before dessert was served. Outside, the parking lot was full of polished black cars and quiet money. My Honda Civic sat near the back, under a light that flickered every few seconds. I got in, shut the door, and sat with both hands on the steering wheel. Then I called Mina. She answered on the second ring. Still alive? I don't want to go tomorrow. Her voice changed immediately. Because you're afraid of what they'll do. I watched the country club windows glow. Because I'm afraid they'll do exactly what they always do. I'll still sit there. Mina was quiet for a moment, then she said, Your work is not small because small people say it is. I closed my eyes. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed against my cheek with another incoming message. An unknown number. I lowered the phone and read it. Dear Tessalin, this is Lenora. I hope I'm not intruding. Graham asked if you would be at the wedding tomorrow. He said your face seems familiar. I'm glad you'll be there. I read it once, then again. Tessalin, not Teresa, not Tess, not the quiet stepsister. Tessalin. Through the windshield I could see Brielle laughing beside Caleb inside the country club. David stood a few feet behind her, raising a glass. Near the bar, Graham Sterling was not looking at them anymore. He was looking toward the parking lot. As if he too was trying to remember something he could not quite name. I touched one pearl earring with my fingertips. Then I started the car. I did not drive home to disappear. I drove home to get ready for the next day. Chapter 4. A chair by the surface entrance September in Greenwich can make a lie look holy if the light is right. Sterling Estate had been transformed by the time I arrived. White and pale blue flowers lined the garden path. A tent stood behind the house, open on the sides so the guests could see the trees beyond the lawn. Soft music drifted through speakers hidden somewhere in the hedges. Every chair, every candle, every folded napkin seemed to understand Brielle's instructions better than people ever had. There were 178 guests expected. Brielle had counted them out loud at least 3 times. I parked where the valet directed me, behind a row of cars that looked like they had never held an old coffee cup or a spare pair of sneakers. My soft gray dress was simple, my shoes comfortable, and my mother's pearl earrings rested against my neck like 2 small hands reminding me to stay steady. In my clutch, beneath my lipstick and my phone, was my RN keychain. I had almost left it at home, then slipped it in at the last minute. I told myself it was habit. Maybe it was also proof. Brielle saw me before I reached the side entrance. She was standing near the garden steps in a wedding dress that looked like it had been designed to make people apologize for breathing near it. Later, I heard someone say it cost almost $15,000. It was beautiful, I could admit that. Brielle was beautiful too. Controlled, bright, perfectly placed. Her eyes moved over me. You're early. Not glad you came. Not good morning. Not thank you for showing up after last night. Just an accusation dressed as a greeting. I didn't want to be late. Good. She glanced toward the lawn. Photos are starting soon. Don't jump into anything until Claire calls you, okay? I wasn't planning to jump. Her smile tightened. You know what I mean, I did. She wanted me available when the camera needed balance, and absent when the picture needed beauty. Claire Daunton was already directing people near the front steps. She had 2 cameras hanging from her shoulders and an assistant holding a reflector. David stood beside Marla, looking stiff in his suit. Caleb was adjusting his cufflinks near Brielle. For a second, he gave me a small nod that looked almost apologetic. Claire looked down at her shot list. Let's get immediate family first. Brielle moved into the center automatically. Caleb beside her. Marla on Brielle's other side. David next to Marla. Stayed where I was. Claire glanced up, and Tessalyn? Brielle turned as if she had just remembered I existed. Oh right, Tessa, come in. I stepped forward. Claire lifted a hand, studying the arrangement. Do you want Tessalyn closer to her father? The silence that followed was small, but I felt it. Brielle smiled without showing teeth. No, that's fine, David heard her. His eyes flicked toward me and then away. He did not move, so I stood at the edge of the photograph, half a step behind his shoulder, close enough to be counted, far enough to be removed. Claire's camera clicked again and again. I wondered how many versions of me she had just taken, and whether Brielle would choose the one where I could still be removed without leaving an obvious gap. The ceremony began under a pale September sky. Brielle walked down the aisle as if the world had been built to receive her. Caleb's face softened when he saw her, and that made the whole thing sadder somehow. He was not acting. He loved the woman he thought he knew. He sat several rows behind the family section. Not beside David, not behind Marla, not anywhere a stranger would assume a daughter belonged. Brielle's vows were smooth and luminous. She spoke about family, honesty, loyalty, and being fully seen. I looked at her veil moving in the breeze and felt nothing at first. Then I felt tired. Because there are few things more exhausting than listening to someone praise the truth while standing on top of a lie. After the ceremony, guests moved toward the tent for the reception. The seating chart stood near the entrance, framed in gold, surrounded by flowers. I found my name at the bottom half, Tessa Monroe. At least this time it was spelled right, table 18, near the service entrance. I stood there long enough for Harper Sloan to appear beside me, holding her small clutch with both hands. Table 18? She asked. I nodded. She gave a dry little laugh. I guess this is where they put the people they don't know what to do with. No, I said. This is where they put the people they think won't matter. The table was near the opening, where servers slipped in and out with trays. 2 seats were empty. The centerpiece was smaller than the others, pale flowers in a low vase, pretty but clearly not chosen for photographs. Harper sat beside me. You came, she said. So did you. I almost didn't. Me too. That made her smile, but only for a second. From across the tent I saw Graham Sterling moving from table to table, greeting people with the patience of a man who had hosted more events than he could count. Lenora was with him at first, then stopped to speak with an older couple near the dance floor. When Graham reached table 18, I expected a handshake, a polite nod, and then his departure. Instead, he pulled out the empty chair beside me and sat down. Harper straightened like she had been called on in class. Graham smiled gently at her, then turned to me. Tessalyn, right? Yes, you said you work at St. Luke's Regional. I do. How long? Since 2016. His expression changed. In emergency department. Trauma rotation most weeks. He looked at my face in a way that made my skin prickle. I was treated at St. Luke's once, he said, after a crash on I-95. Noise of the tent thinned. I could still hear forks, laughter, music, but all of it moved farther away. Near Stamford, I asked. He did not blink. Yes. My hand tightened around my water glass. Graham leaned back slowly, as if he did not want to frighten the memory before it fully arrived. November, he said. Terrible rain. I remember that more clearly than almost anything. Rain and someone telling me not to close my eyes. My throat went dry. November 14th? His face stilled. Yes. The pearl earring on my left ear brushed my neck when I turned my head. Graham saw the movement. His eyes went to the pearls and stayed there. The nurse that night, he said carefully, talked to me about her mother. She said her mother wore pearl earrings when she read to her. She said steady hands could wait to shake until the work was done. My heart did something painful and quiet. Harper looked from him to me, realizing before either of us said it. Graham's voice lowered. Was that you? I wanted to say no because no would have been easier. No would have let me stay at table 18, near the service entrance, where Brielle had placed me. But the memory was already there. His trapped body. His voice fading. My hands on his jaw and neck. My knees in glass. The rain washing blood into the road. I stopped because no one else had reached your car yet, I said. Graham closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, they were wet. I looked for you. I did not know what to do with that sentence. People had spent years not looking for me. Graham Sterling had spent nearly 4 years trying to find a nurse he could not name. The article only said off-duty nurse, he said. The hospital had a public commendation, but they wouldn't give me private information, and I respected that. I sent a letter through St. Luke's. I never knew if it reached you. It didn't, I said softly. I kept the article anyway. Lenora told me maybe you didn't want to be found. Maybe you had your reasons. I didn't want attention. I understand. He looked at me with a kind of seriousness I was not used to receiving, but I still wanted you to know I came home because of you. Before I could answer, Lenora appeared beside the table. Graham? He looked up at his wife, then back at me. It's her, he said. Lenora's face changed. She looked at me, then at the pearls, then across the room toward Brielle. For the first time that day, someone saw the whole shape of it. Lenora sat in the chair on my other side. Did Brielle know? She asked quietly. I shook my head. No one in my family ever asked about that night. That sentence landed between us like something breakable. A few feet away, Caleb was walking toward us, concern tightening his face. Dad? Everything okay? Graham looked at his son. Did Brielle ever tell you Tessalyn worked trauma? Caleb glanced at me, then back at his father. She said Tessa worked at a hospital. She said she didn't like talking about herself. Lenora's voice was calm, but there was steel under it. Did she tell you Tessalyn has episodes? Caleb's face shifted. She said she gets overwhelmed. Harper made a small sound beside me, too quiet for most people to hear. Caleb looked at me then, not with pity this time, but with the beginning of shame. Claire Danton approached the table with her camera lowered. Mrs. Sterling, they're asking about the timing for speeches. Lenora looked at Claire. Do you keep the raw footage from the rehearsal dinner? Claire hesitated just long enough to understand the question mattered. Yes, full audio too. Lenora nodded once. Thank you. No one said anything more about it, but I saw Caleb's eyes move from Claire to Brielle, and I knew he was starting to count backward through every sentence he had been told. Then Brielle saw us. She crossed the tent quickly, her dress gathered in one hand, smile locked into place. There you are, she said to Graham too brightly. Everyone's looking for you. Her eyes cut to me. Tessa, I hope you're not overwhelming them with hospital stories. Graham looked at her for a long second. I asked. 2 words. Brielle's smile faltered. Caleb stepped closer. Brielle, can we talk? She laughed softly. Now? Yes, now. They moved toward the side of the tent, but not far enough for me to miss everything. Caleb's voice was low. Why did you say she has episodes? I never said it like that. Grant heard you. She gets sensitive. I was trying to protect the day. From what? Brielle's face hardened for half a second before she remembered where she was. From exactly this. I looked away before they saw me watching. A few minutes later I found David near the patio, holding a glass he had not been drinking from. You saw where she seated me, I said. He sighed. It's a big wedding. Seating is complicated. You saw my name wrong. Saw me cropped out. You heard her call me just a nurse. His mouth opened, then closed. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. That almost broke something in me. You could have been my father. He looked down. The band began to quiet. Someone tapped a microphone near the dance floor. Reception speeches were about to begin. Brielle stood in the center of the tent, radiant again, holding the mic with both hands. She looked like a woman who believed she had pulled everything back under control. We returned to table 18. Graham sat at the head table, but his eyes stayed on me. Lenora leaned toward Owen Price, the Sterling Foundation counsel, and said something too low for me to hear. Caleb watched Brielle as if he was suddenly unsure whether he had married a woman or a story. Brielle lifted the microphone and smiled at the room. I want to thank the people who made me who I am. Chapter 5. In the Groom. Father stood the room, gave her the kind of silence she loved. Brielle stood beneath the soft lights with the microphone in both hands, her veil gathered behind one shoulder, her face turned just enough for every camera to find her best angle. She thanked Marla first, calling her the woman who taught me grace. She thanked David for showing up for our family. My father smiled and lowered his head, accepting a compliment that had never really belonged to him. She thanked Caleb, her bridesmaids, the vendors, the planner, Graham and Lenora, and both families who shaped us. She did not say my name. Then she smiled toward the edge of the tent, toward the service entrance, toward table 18. Some people support loudly, and some people support quietly from the edges. I'm grateful for both. A few guests made soft sounds of approval, the kind people make when they hear something polished and assume it must be kind. David clapped. Marla clapped. Harper did not. I sat still, my hands folded in my lap. Brielle had done it again. But this time she addressed the dismissal as gratitude. She had not called me family. She had turned me into atmosphere, something useful only because it stayed out of the way. The MC stepped forward to take back the microphone. Before he reached it, Graham Sterling stood. Tent changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was more like every conversation suddenly remembered who owned the house. Brielle's face brightened. For 1 second I saw exactly what she expected. Graham would welcome her into the Sterling family. He would bless the marriage. He would make the day complete. But Graham did not look at Brielle. He looked at the room. A few minutes ago, and last night as well, I heard someone use the words just a nurse. I need everyone here to understand what those words mean to me. No one moved. Brielle's smile froze. Graham's voice stayed calm. On November 14, 2021, I was trapped in my car on I-95 near Stamford. It was raining hard enough that I could barely tell where the road ended. An 18-wheeler had jackknifed. My door was crushed. My chest was pinned. I could not feel my right leg, and I remember thinking I was going to die before anyone could get me out. The forks stopped. The glasses stopped. Even the servers near the side entrance slowed. A woman crawled through broken glass to reach me. She did not have a stage. She did not have an audience. She did not have permission to panic. She kept my airway open. She kept my neck still. She kept talking to me for 38 minutes while the rescue crew worked to cut me out. My throat tightened. He was not looking at me yet, but every word had already found me. She told me not to close my eyes. She told me about her mother, Elise. She told me about a pair of pearl earrings. She said steady hands could wait to shake until the work was done. Across the tent, David's face went gray. Graham turned slightly, his voice deepening. Just a nurse is the person who notices your breathing change before the machine screams. Just a nurse is the person who stays calm when everyone else is waiting for permission to panic. Just a nurse is why I came home to my wife. Just a nurse is why I stood here today and watched my son get married. The room was no longer looking at Brielle. Graham turned toward table 18. The woman who did that is sitting there. At the table by the service entrance, table where someone thought she would not matter. 178 guests turned toward me. I forgot how to breathe. Graham said my name clearly. Tessa Monroe, not Teresa, not Tess. Not quiet stepsister. Tessa Monroe. The name my mother had given me. Moved through that tent like it had been waiting years for someone to carry it properly. Owen Price stepped beside Graham and handed him a folder. Graham held up a copy of the old article from the Fairfield County Register and the public commendation from St. Luke's Regional Medical Center. This is not private medical information, Graham said. This is a public commendation my foundation has kept for nearly 4 years while we tried to identify the nurse from I-95. Dr. Naomi Kessler confirmed what these records already showed. The person I've been trying to thank was sitting in my home this weekend, being introduced as though her life's work were something small. Lenora stood then. My husband carried that article for years. He called her the nurse from I-95. Tonight we learned her family had a name for her too. She looked at Brielle. Just a nurse. That was when Harper stood. Her chair scraped softly against the floor. Her hands were shaking, but her back was straight. Lenora stood beside Graham. Caleb stood next. Then an older woman near the front rose slowly, wiping her eyes. Then another guest. Then another. The room rose in pieces until the applause came like weather. I did not stand, I could not. For most of my life, I had been trained to make my presence easy to overlook. Now the room was looking straight at me, and I did not know where to put all that attention. Graham looked at me over the applause. You don't have to stand for us. We are standing for you. Brielle was still near the microphone, her face pale under the makeup. That's a beautiful story, she said, forcing a smile. I had no idea. Graham looked at her for a long second. That is exactly the problem. You had no idea, and still you decided she was small. Caleb turned to his bride. What else did you tell us about her? Brielle's voice sharpened. Are you really doing this at our wedding? Caleb's answer was quiet, but everyone near them heard it. You made it part of our wedding when you lied to my family. Lenora stepped in before the room could turn into a spectacle. This conversation should continue privately. Porcelain has already been displayed enough for one day. In a side room off the main hall, the perfect wedding finally lost its lighting. Brielle, Caleb, Graham, Lenora, Owen Price, Claire Danton, Marla, David, and I stood in a circle that felt smaller than any table they had ever placed me at. Claire confirmed that the raw audio from the rehearsal dinner had captured Brielle's words and David's laugh. She did not play it for the room outside. She did not need to. Caleb listened to a few seconds through her phone, and I watched his expression fall apart quietly. Brielle crossed her arms. I was trying to protect my wedding. I looked at her. From what? My job? My name? Or the fact that I didn't match the family you sold them? Her face twisted before she could stop it. She was supposed to stay in the background. No one spoke. Then lower, almost through her teeth, she said, she was supposed to stay invisible for one day. There it was. Not stress, not misunderstanding, not teasing. Purpose. Owen Price did not raise his voice. Mrs. Sterling, you made false personal statements about Ms. Monroe. Words like episodes and social struggles can affect a first responder's personal and professional reputation. After tonight, there will be a written correction sent to the people who heard those claims. If the false story continues, the Foundation will issue a formal cease and desist and non-disparagement notice. I did not ask for that. I did not have to. For once, someone else was protecting the truth before I had to beg for it. Caleb looked at Brielle like he was seeing the outline of a stranger. You will apologize publicly. You will sign the correction. We start counseling within 2 weeks, and my family is pausing any financial help with the house and all social introductions until we understand what this marriage is built on. Brielle started to cry. No one moved to rescue her from it. David stepped toward me. I didn't know. The words came out weak. I looked at him, and for the first time I did not try to make the truth gentle. You didn't know because you never asked. His eyes filled. I was trying to keep peace. No, you kept Brielle comfortable. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I nodded once. Be sorry on a Tuesday. Dad. Not only when important people are watching. Back in the tent, Brielle took the microphone again. Caleb stood beside her but did not hold her hand. Her voice shook as she told the guests she had diminished my work, allowed people to misunderstand me, and said things that were not true because she wanted to control the image of her family. Lenora from the front asked gently, "And Tessalyn?" Brielle looked at me. Tessalyn did not deserve to be treated like someone we had to hide. I did not go to her, I did not hug her, I did not forgive her. Because a room was waiting for me to make everything comfortable again. I only said, "I heard you." Later, away from the microphone, Graham told me about the Sterling Foundation for First Responders. The I-95 First Responder Scholarship had been planned for nearly 4 years. He wanted me to be the inaugural recipient if I accepted, covering advanced trauma care nursing certification, continuing education, conference travel, and leadership training for nurses, up to $185,000 over 24 months. It isn't cash on a stage, he said. It's support for the work you already do. I don't know what to say. Graham smiled, tired and kind. You already said it on I-95. Stay with me. I did. A week later, Megan Lee, from the foundation, called about paperwork. She spoke in the careful, practical tone of someone who understood that real support came with forms, deadlines, and signatures, not applause. Brielle signed the written correction. It did not go viral. There was no internet scandal. Just the quieter kind of consequence, the kind that reaches the exact people who heard the lie. Caleb and Brielle started counseling within 2 weeks. The Sterling family paused their financial help with the house and stepped back from social introductions for 6 months. Marla texted that I had made everyone uncomfortable. I replied, I'm done making myself smaller to protect people who never protected me. David sent a handwritten letter. For the first time he wrote Tessalyn. I read it once and put it away. A correct name did not erase 20 years. Claire sent me one photograph. I was still seated at table 18. Graham was standing in front of me. Behind him, the room was rising. It was not Brielle's official wedding portrait. It was the only honest picture from that day. Then I went back to work. At St. Luke's, no one called me a hero. A voice just shouted, Tessa, trauma too. And I went. I wore my badge, my old shoes, and my mother's pearl earrings. Dr. Kessler saw me at the nurse's station and asked if I was all right. I said, I'm a nurse. She nodded. I know. Weeks later, a Thanksgiving card arrived from Graham and Lenora Sterling. The envelope said Tessa Monroe. Inside, Lenora had written, there will be a chair for you at our table. I placed that card beside my RN badge and the commendation I had once hidden in a drawer. This time, I left them where the morning light could touch my name. Brielle may have changed. Or maybe she only learned how to hide better. And sometimes I still wonder who hurt me more, the sister who called me just a nurse, or the father who laughed when she did. If you were in my place, would you believe Brielle had truly changed? Or would you think she only learned how to hide it better? And who would have hurt you more, the sister who tried to make you invisible, or the father who watched it happen and laughed?